welcome to ASAP, your African Social Activism Playbook. I'm one of your hosts, T. Jamal, joined as always by my wonderful co-host, Michelee. What's going on, sis?
Hey, brother. I'm pretty well. I'm doing pretty well this morning. Feeling quite lovely.
Yeah.
It's been a good but quick weekend for me. So, now we're
Yeah,
just thrusted into the week. But I mean, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good though. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. It was over in a instant. It was
Yeah,
like weekend.
right.
Get back to
And
work.
the and the family, everybody, the updates on the family, everybody good.
Everybody is doing well. Everybody is COVID free. We
Mm,
made it to the other side. So people are being extra cautious now. Like
right.
I wear I've been on my mask. So I've been wearing my mask. I've been wearing my face shield on top of my mask. So I don't play no game. Like the
Right.
mask protects you from me. My face shield protects your germs from getting inside my vicinity. But that's the crazy thing, though. My mother was being extra precautious. Like she barely left
Yeah.
the house, which is one of the reasons that she was so like upset, really, because she was like, "How in the world did I get this when I've been taking all the precautions?" So it's
Right.
just got to be extra careful. And if you
Yeah.
are the person who does leave the house in your household, you gotta make sure you're taking all your precautions so you don't bring it back home to somebody who is doing everything they can do to avoid it. So
Mhm.
this is one of those things where we need that African mindset of all for one, one for all, where everybody's just kind of taking care of each other. It's not a time for
Mhm.
individualism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Which we learned a lot last week in our Quilombo, Maroon,
Right.
Palenque themed episodes when it's all about, the preservation of the community more so than, the needs of or the wants of one person. And most
Hmm.
of the time it's not even the needs, like the wants of people. Yeah, people acting like children.
I'm
So
telling
yeah,
you.
but that's me. What's going on with
Yeah, I mean, shoot. We are definitely still, you know, just making sure wiping everything down. It's crazy because it really has to be a routine. Like I don't every time I go to the store, I come home, we got the Clorox wipes on the counter. Like everything's getting wiped down before it get put up. Gotta as soon as you walk in, drop everything, go wash your hands. Like you just really gotta make it a
you?
routine because I have a habit of like, I can just go touching everything, touch my face and my mouth, you know what I mean? So it's like I just have to really um be aware of that everything. So mm,
Yeah.
um,
So yeah, hold on. We got some comments. What's going on here? Oh, my mother herself.
okay. What's she
Yes.
saying?
I can honestly say during the time of my sickness, being able to come out here every day and listen to you all helped me heal. It took my mind off of everything that I was going through. And that
Oh,
is
I'm so
one of
glad
the
to
points
hear
of this show. That is
it.
encouraging. So yeah, we will
Yes.
continue to do that. You never know who is listening, because I done
Right.
heard some people. I see some comments, and I heard some people who were watching another interview that I did with somebody else on the channel, and they were like,
Hmm.
"Man, the interview we did is really bringing attention." And I'm like, I'm looking at the channel like it's growing, steadily and slowly, but
Right.
it's making an impact already. So all we have to do
Right.
is just keep creating, keep putting it out there. Like they say in one of my favorite movies, which we'll break down at one point, Field of
Yeah.
Dreams. If you build it, they will come.
Oh, I ain't seen that yet. You just put me on to something. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Oh yeah, I'll put you on. That's one of my favorite movies. It's dope. It's
Okay.
yeah. Anyway, we'll I'll put that on your list. Yeah. But
All right.
today in our Straight Truth No Chaser, I just called it the Black Freedom Struggle, right? And I said I don't really use the term civil rights movement, Black Power movement, because that breaks it up into eras. Those are just eras of the entire Black freedom struggle. The Black freedom struggle has been going on since Europeans hit the shores of Africa. Like, honestly, because we were doing well, just in case y'all didn't know. Because I've had to have an argument with African Americans who was like, man, we should be grateful that we were enslaved. I almost had to choke somebody, but I was like 18-year-old me, 19-year-old me, who used to engage in senseless disagreements with people who weren't ready yet. Doesn't mean that, you know, seeds couldn't be planted, but there's no point in going back and forth with those types of situations. But that's because a person with that type of statement, though, has been taught that nothing existed in Africa prior to Europeans coming, and that they gave us everything that we have now. They gave us any of the advancements that we have. It came from Europe. They repackaged what we taught them and made it seem like they brought it to us first. But a lot of us don't realize that. So it's very important that's why I'll just say this. Just why in ASAP, we don't just talk about from enslavement on. We talk about the deep, deep past, the ancient. We talk about what happened in between. We talk about the realities of what was happening during enslavement on the continent. We talk about what was happening in the Caribbean, in North America, in South America, so that people can get a full grasp of how the world was. Because often when we learn history about any specific era, it's the era and it's a specific geographical location. Like when we learn about medieval times, that era, we only learned about Europe, what was happening in Europe during, you know, King Arthur and all that stuff. But what was happening in other parts of the world at that same time period? Like history does a very huge disservice to us, and it kind of limits our scope to the fact that there was there's always been the whole world happening all at the same time.
That's very true.
You know what I mean? Every year, the whole world is happening, not just whoever is right.
That's actually a really good point, though. You know, I think we use these markers to, like, you know, just pinpoint, I guess, you know, highlight specific events or, you know, people or whatever that we're talking about. But that is very important to mention, especially talking about the African struggle. You know, like we have been through this, you know, and I think when we break it up and just talk about like one specific movement, if we just label it as a movement, you know, and not paying attention to everything else that's going on in the world, like still involving African people, right? Like we kind of break it up and it's like, well, that's their problem. That was something that they were going through. This is something that we were going through, you know, and it's like we're not seeing it as our collective struggle. We don't see how it's all connected. But yeah, we have to do a lot of corrective history.
An example of that is apartheid. Apartheid and the civil rights movement coincided with one another. They were happening at the same time. The African independence movement and the civil rights movement overlap in time. Understanding that concept and knowing that both of those continental African situations or events were happening at the same time as a Black freedom struggle in the US, and then you get to ask yourself questions of, were there any influences? Were there any, you know, communications between the two? And then you start to dig a little deeper and you find out, oh man, there was influence back and forth. There was communication between people on the continent and people in the US and people in the Caribbean. They were actually partnering with one another and struggling together and seeing one another and fighting together. And then you start to really open up the full scope of, okay, so I was taught this bit of history. Like when we learn about the Louisiana Purchase in U.S. history,
Mm-hmm.
at that point, they don't teach us that the Louisiana Purchase was only available because the Haitian Revolution had bankrupted France.
Right.
That was a direct result of
Mm-hmm.
our ancestors kicking France out of Haiti, plummeting their stock, saying, okay, we don't have this sugar cane, we don't have the fruit, we don't have all of the resources that we were getting for free from
Right.
the enslaved populations in Haiti. So now our entire national economy as France is about to go under. So all right, all that land that we own over there on North America, we got to sell that to the US.
Right. Direct consequences.
Direct. And we don't learn that in high school, in middle school, when we first learn about the Louisiana Purchase.
Mm-hmm.
We learn about that if you go to college, if
Right.
you study African American studies, right?
Exactly. Like that's the thing, is like, even if you went to college, even if if you got further education, it's still not guaranteed you'll learn all of this information.
So
yeah, man,
that's why, like, I'm really strong on Black freedom struggle, and we'll get into it a little bit on our highlight reel, because our highlight reel dates back to, so we are in the 21st century, so it dates back to the 17th century. It always throws me off that the century,
right, the year before, right?
one number from the actual year. So the 1600s is the 17th century, right? Because the 1900s were the 20th century. Yeah. Okay. I'll figure that one out in a minute. As soon as I understand why they do that or what the purpose of that is, because I haven't studied that in a minute. I don't even know what subject that is.
Yeah, I don't know.
What do I look to find out why that is? Somebody in the comments help me out. So anyway, but to the point,
idea, but I don't remember.
Go ahead. This a theory show.
No. Just go ahead. I ain't about to be wrong. You ain't about to have me recorded being wrong. I'll revisit the history books. I'll just hit up Google later.
So anyway, yeah, one of the things now, before we move on, I want you to tell the audience that hashtag that you wanted us to start, because I thought about it as we were laughing, because we have fun on this show. We talk about real important things on this show, but we have fun on this show because, and I spoke about it on previous episodes, that, I saw a picture of Martin Luther King playing pool, and he was just like, had a mean mug on. He was just having fun, just being silly. And we never saw that.
Right.
Like, we never saw like images of the civil rights leaders or political activists being silly or just being human. Yeah. And it gives you this type of mindset that if you want to be that, then you have to lose a bit of your humanity, or you have to like isolate yourself from people, or you can't have fun in the midst of being educated or being, quote unquote woke. Right. And that's not true. Like, at all. Don't deny yourself.
Right. We are human. Like, we're whole people with all of the emotions. All, we can enjoy life even though we're
and it's it's important. It's called balance. Like, if you are too much of anything, it is going to end up being bad. If you're too silly all the time, then people won't take you serious. If you're too serious all the time, people won't want to be around. That is, it's consequences to all of it. And you will stress yourself out over stuff that you can't control. Laugh. I remember there was a time my brother and I, we were living together and we were driving. And then I opened up like the gas bill or something, and it wasn't my pay week. And I just looked at the number. I looked at my bank account. I looked at the number, and I just bust out laughing. I'm gonna cry. I can't pay you right. Right. No matter how much you call me, I can answer the phone. I can avoid
Goodness.
your call. Either way, you not about to get this money till I have it. So ain't no point in me stressing over it. So I take that same thing with, everything that Black people go through. We laugh stuff off. We will make jokes out of our most traumatic issues. Like, we will laugh at some stuff that if we were normal people, under normal circumstances, you would never laugh at.
Right.
But we have to survive. Like,
Exactly.
we gotta
This
get through
life
this
goes
stuff.
on.
Mm-hmm.
How do we?
Even as
We would be stressed out. Like we would literally just be stressed out.
we would all be having anxiety attacks and heart attacks every 2 seconds. Like,
right.
who
Heavy stuff, man.
was
Heavy
it?
stuff.
One of the was it a running back or a wide receiver? Dang, I just forgot his name, but he wore a suit with all of the names
Oh, I saw
of
that.
the people who have been slain by the police.
Mm-hmm.
And like it filled up the entire suit.
In
It looked
small
like
text.
a pinstripe suit.
Yeah, in small text. It wasn't even. That's what I was thinking.
Right.
I was like, this is not even like large, text to be able to take up that whole suit. But crazy.
Which is sad, right? That's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But he turned it into swag with a message. And it brought people's attention to it. And it's a conversation.
And just imagine, like you were just talking about how, when we're talking about different time periods of this struggle, like even police brutality is not only a current day struggle. Our elders and ancestors, like even before, all of this, before the 2000s, before the 1990s, before the 80s, this was still going. Police brutality was definitely still an issue in our community, like for our people. So it's not just brand new. So just to think that the names that he had is most likely only from 2000, probably 2010 and up, over the last 10 years, sadly. But yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
It's
which is crazy.
struggle.
Yeah, and is like you said, we don't know what time period it dates back to, all the names, but it goes back to that conversation we were having over what celebrities and athletes can do. And you talked about distractions earlier, and people felt like the NBA and the NFL coming back would be a distraction. But it all depends on, your level of focus in the first place. If you're dedicated to doing what we're about to be doing, you won't allow anything to distract you. And then on top of that, if our athletes, if our entertainers actually step up and use their platforms, because if the NBA hadn't come back, they wouldn't have been on an elevated platform, any more elevated than any of us or on Twitter, other than the amount of followers that they have to make the types of statements that athletes are making right now. Because now they can use the sport to elevate their message.
Right.
Because honestly, especially in football, when you don't really know players by face and name, because everybody is covered, their head is covered. So when they use that post game time, or they use the time on the field to kneel or to lock arms or do anything in televised time, that goes out to everybody. That goes out to people who won't follow them on Twitter. That goes out to people who it won't pop up on their social media timeline, or they may not watch that news network that says the other side of the political spectrum. So people may never get that information, but everybody is watching a sporting event. Everybody is watching a film. Everybody is watching the red carpet or the award show. So when you take that time to use your elevated platform, where you get multiple parties from different spectrums and views, and you deliver a message that's even better.
Right.
Like you can, like I said, everything is a tool. You can use a hammer for its purpose to build things, or you can use it to hit somebody in the head and kill them. Like it's not the hammer's fault.
Right.
It's how you used it.
Exactly.
So
That's
it's
the
not
thing.
the
And
fact that
yeah, and
Mhm.
even thinking about that, where you were talking about athletes and entertainers and stuff, we have a lot of these. Well, a lot of people tend to feel that celebrities and athletes or whoever, don't have a place in. Well, shouldn't really be speaking up, or like they don't think that it's effective, like whatever their methods are of bringing awareness to these topics. A lot of people don't see their see them as having really a voice or being credible in this struggle. And it's just like, well, they are, especially like looking at the Black people who are entertainers and athletes, like they are also Black people. They are also affected, and I think we tend, like
Right.
we spoke about this poor righteous teachers, the idea of, once you get money, then now you're detached from your people, from your community, from the struggle, and just from the world, what the everyday issues or just world politics. You're not. They are. Just because they got some money now don't mean that they can't or they shouldn't, stand for certain things. And yeah, we just have to realize that we all have a position, whatever platform you have. It doesn't matter if you have 10 followers or 10,000 followers, or, everyone does have a role. And I think it is great, like what they're doing, whether they're wearing a t-shirt on the court or on the field, kneeling, linking arms, because they are doing something very important. They are keeping it very relevant and letting them know that, like whether it's them protesting, saying that we won't play, or, it's just, it's always something that someone could be making a statement about. Yeah, we just have to just really appreciate everyone's role in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I was saying, athletes, they are now using their voice. Is one of the things that is one of the positives that's coming out of the stillness that the pandemic created. It
Mhm.
created a stillness that everybody kind of had to be aware, because there was nothing else to distract you during that
Very
time.
true.
So
Mhm.
now when these things start to come back, people are like, all right, I can't be the one who doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
Like the whole NBA, we're like, okay, I can't be the one who doesn't say something. I have to, in my press conference, win or lose, I have to make this about more than just this game. I have to make sure that I'm doing my part to make sure that people aren't using this just as a distraction. Yeah, you
Mhm.
need to, kind of wipe your mind from the heaviness of, the gravity of the
Mhm.
situation, but not losing sight of what is still going on. Like
Right. And
whether
because we
whether or
tend
not
to
your
keep that
basketball game isn't the most important thing,
right.
on the mind. That shouldn't
Right.
be
Because
causing
people,
arguments at this moment.
mhm. Yeah, and people, stay on that, shut up and dribble or whatever. But shout out to also like the WNBA, who they really been leading the charge, in making a statement and being consistent with that, and standing strong. A lot of times we don't pay attention to what they're doing too, but
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah, they've been loud. And so yeah, shout
mhm.
out to the WNBA. And speaking of women's sports, Naomi Osaka again, who makes the show again.
Yes,
Um, she
I
won the
love
US
her.
Open. Now she's fire. She is very outspoken. She had this social media post about, feeling the spirit of her ancestors and knowing that, who built her. So she
Right,
is really about it. And then also she was being interviewed after her US Open win, and she had, she was wearing a mask before and after every game with the names of people who had been, slain by the police. And I think she did Trayvon. I know she did Philando Castillo. I know she did Breonna Taylor. I know she did George Floyd. And I can't remember the other ones that she did, but she was able to wear all 7 of them. She made 7. It was 7 rounds, and she was hoping that she could wear all 7. And she was like, I hope I win so I can wear all 7. And she won. And she put that on her back as motivation to get her to the finals so she could, win and wear every mask. And I'm sure if she hadn't won, she still would have done it. But again, it wouldn't have been on that elevated platform. It would have just been on her social media outlet. And with her winning, it elevated the platform that whether you wanted to hear the message or not, you had to, because you were watching this sporting event. And she's a spicy one, because the interviewer asked her, like, what's the message that you wanted to give by, wearing the mask? You talked about wearing the mask of all the slain people by the police. And she was like, what message did you take from it?
Right.
And it was like, she threw the question right back in the face. It was like, what I'm saying. You understand why I did this. Like, it's self-explanatory. And it's not like this was the first time that she had spoken of it. These are people who were unjustly slain, Black people. And we want justice for these people, and we won't forget their names, and we need to know their names. Like, it's not okay just to say, the people who have been killed, because then you lose sight of their humanity. You lose sight of the individuals, of the family that's impacted by that loss. Like, sometimes we get so used to death that we forget how that, like, as a person who's, lost people, after a family member or somebody close to you dies, that time period of immediate grief, like, of not having that person there, and how it kind of disrupts your life for a moment. Now, it hurts when it's a sickness that takes somebody away from you. It hurts when, a sickness kind of just strikes. That hurts because it's immediate. It hurts when it's a chronic illness and they've been suffering for a long time, and you're kind of relieved that they passed away because you didn't want them to suffer. It still hurts. But having someone killed is like they've been stolen from you. So you feel double hurt.
Right. And then just add on top of that, it's no justice for their murders.
Exactly.
So this is definitely
not only no justice, but then you have the people who did the murder try to justify the murder, and then try to sully the name of your loved one. And now you got to fight against that. You don't even have time to grieve because you're fighting for the honor of your loved one.
Right.
You're trying to fight back narratives that aren't true. And so you got to deal with all of that. And so it's just so much to deal with. And the fact that, Naomi Osaka, and she's like young though. She's in her early 20s. So, shout out to her, because the youth are all, people love getting on the youth, especially this generation of youth. But
we bold, we loud.
And they got different styles, different ways. And it's not gonna always be the same way that we do things. Right. And we have to have that type of Fundi mindset where we're able to see the good and the way forward of how things are going to progress, where it's the same message, it's just a different way of getting it out there. So no more respectability politics. It's about, look, you know what I'm trying to say. I don't have time to sit here and babysit you over my message over and over again, because what you're trying to do is get me to slip up and say something. And you tell me what you got from me wearing these names. And how did you feel about it? Like,
exactly.
I love it. Bold women. And speaking of bold women, our highlight
leading
reel,
right into it.
our highlight reel is none other than Queen Nzinga. And we kind of alluded to this earlier, that we were going to be talking about things that were happening way back in the 17th century, because I don't know if y'all know, but enslavement was happening prior to 1776, when the United States supposedly became a country. Like, people were over here already,
right,
enslaved. You wouldn't know it from the history books, because they teach you the Revolutionary War, then they teach you the Civil War, as if those were the only things that were happening at that moment. Because I remember I was learning history in school, and I was like in maybe 3rd or 4th grade, and we went over the Revolutionary War, and it's told you about the founding fathers and the Articles of Confederation, and then the Constitution, and then no taxation without representation, blah blah blah, and then a war happened, right? And then the next couple of chapters, you jump into the Civil War, and then you see them talking about enslaved people. And that's the first time in the history book that I saw them mention Black people. So for many years, for maybe 2nd to 5th grade, I thought Black people weren't here yet during the Revolutionary War. Because I'm like, and then when we learned about the Civil War, I was like, so when did they tell us that the Black people got here?
Right.
Like, where is that in here?
Deep. Yeah, that's true though. That's true. You don't see all of that breakdown.
I was trying to figure it out. I was in elementary school, like racking my brain, like, so did I miss something? Did they not?
Right.
What? How did we get over here?
Right.
Like, okay, the Civil War was fought to end slavery, supposedly, blah, blah, blah. But where did these Africans come from? And when did they get here? Because this is like 1880s that the Civil War happened. No, 1860s that the Civil War happens, right? And we know the country becomes a thing in 1776. So what's happening? What happened in those 100 years? Like, when did the enslaved come? So the truth is, the enslaved were here the entire time. Our African ancestors, when we say we built this country, we talking about we were here the first day.
Right.
We were here day one.
Building. Literally
maybe day 3 at the most. Yeah. You know what I mean? Day 3 at the most, because it was some, it was some people who came to Virginia and they all died. And so we weren't on those voyages, but like soon after they, mistakenly murdered all the natives and found out they didn't know how to work the land, they were like, oh man, who we know who can do this? Who's intelligent enough to know agriculture and just be able to adapt to new environments? Africans. So again, the enslavement of Africans wasn't because we were lower. It was because they understood what we could offer. So anyway, Queen Nzinga. Queen Nzinga was a queen in Angola, and she was actually a princess, and her brother was king, and the Portuguese were like doing their dirt in like the western coast of Central Africa. So if you know where Angola is on the map, it's not the top of West Africa. It's still, technically on the Atlantic coast of Africa, but it's more Central Africa is, a little bit more south. So the Portuguese were doing their dirt around that area, Congo, Angola, Mozambique, that area. So they were coming to bring the slave trade. So again, I just want to keep pausing myself. So when we say as Africans in the diaspora that we feel a connection to the entire continent, is because we didn't just come from Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal.
Right.
We came from Angola, Mozambique, and Congo. We came from the center of Africa as well. Like they did not discriminate on where they took us from during that, you know, the tragedy of the Atlantic slave trade. It was people who had to walk miles just to get to the coast. It was people who walked from Central Africa to get to the coast. Like the brutality of this started before we left the continent.
Right. I was just about to say, because a lot of times we only think about those who made it all the way to America. There are people who died on the ships. There are like a lot of people who died on the ships. There are a lot of people who died in the, you know, in the slave dungeons, you know, in the dungeons that they were holding Africans in, you know, to be shipped off. They were, again, like you just said, walking miles to get wherever they had to go. You know, like this was a whole voyage, right? Like,
right.
I
So,
mean, and
it was people who died on the way to the dungeon. Like,
right. And
like
people
that.
who died fighting the people off. You know, they killed a lot of people, you know, who refused to go. You know, it's not like, you know, they didn't all go willingly. You know, and so it's a lot of people, you know, actually involved in it and who didn't actually make it all the way to, you know, to the final destination.
So Queen Nzinga, born in the 17th century in the 1600s, first of all, she was a princess. Her brother was the king. She had to go be his representative, his proxy, in a meeting with the Portuguese because the Portuguese were coming to Angola to do trade. And at the time, they understood that they couldn't just outright deny trade with the Portuguese because their military force was strong. And so they tried to go and do, you know, the ambassador diplomacy route where, all right, I'll go and I'll talk to them and I'll see, you know, if we can try to limit them from enslaving us, right? Because they understood that the Portuguese were already doing the slave trade in Congo. And they were coming down Congo to do Angola. Angola had a coast. So it was, you know, an easier way to ship people from Central Africa and use the route from the Congo. So that's what the Portuguese wanted. And so Nzinga went to the meeting and, you know, she was diplomatic and they made like a little trade agreement. But then her brother saw the oncoming of the slave trade coming to Angola, and he committed suicide. He was like, I can't protect my people. He just kind of felt down on himself and was like, I'm the king and I can't protect my people. And so in his stead, his sister took over, and she, from the beginning, like her entire life was built around her, like being a skilled warrior, being very intelligent, being, you know, she was very high regarded throughout the city state where she was from. So when she became queen, she made sure that she prepared everybody for battle. Like they were ready for battle at all times because she knew, okay, I understand what my brother did. I understand what, you know, what he was feeling, but we are about to fight back. And we're about to stop this, you know, this slave trade as much as we can. So she was on her end on the continent fighting against the slave trade, trying to make sure that it didn't expand, trying to do with all her military force and power, and they fought off the Portuguese for 30 years. So they used forms of diplomatic resistance. They used like
guerrilla
straight up war.
warfare.
They went to guerrilla warfare. Yet again, guerrilla warfare pops his head up. Home field advantage, right? And so when you know your terrain, so that came in handy for them. And it was just, she was able to fight them off for like 30 years. She was like, up until the time of her death, she was still out on the battlefield.
Right.
Like,
That's the thing. That's the important thing to mention too, is that she's out there physically fighting herself. Like, she was trained, militarily, as a diplomat and everything like that, from trained politically and militarily as a child. And she would also accompany her father, who was the king, everywhere he went, to all the meetings. So she knew how to interact with these people. She knew how to talk with them. She knew how to read and write, in the same language as the people she was meeting with. So this woman, I mean, she was very intelligent and forceful, and again, like a leader, a real leader, being on the field herself.
And it's just very important. So, so Nzinga died in 1663, which means, she's born somewhere around like 1604 or something. The dates and times aren't really accurate. Like the time of death is, but the time of birth isn't really that accurate, but it's early 1600s. So we're talking about,
it was the late 15.
Yeah, probably the late 1500s. So we're talking about the late 1500s, late 16th century Africa, a woman and just a culture of people who read, write, intelligent, meeting, strategy. So when we hear that we were brutes and we were I'm taking every opportunity to undo and debunk myths. And I'm talking to our people as much as I'm talking to other people, because our people have bought into, and when I say our people, African descendants have bought into the hype of white supremacy just as much as anybody else. We have limited ourselves and limited our scope of what we think we can be based on what they told us we can't be.
Right.
And Queen Nzinga and so many others. This is why we are doing these highlight reels, to show you that at no point in history were Africans just these know-nothing brutes that they present us to be. One of the things that Queen Nzinga did, one of the ways that she was able to expand this war for so long with, the weaponry that we had on the continent, she used Europeans, fighting against each other. So we all know the Berlin Conference happened and that Europe was divided. You had the English versus the French. You had the Portuguese versus the Spanish, the Dutch. Everybody wanted their little piece. So they fighting against each other as Europeans. So Nzinga peeps that, and she's like, okay, so the Portuguese got issues with the Dutch. So we gonna go talk to the Dutch, form an alliance with them. They're gonna help us fight off the Portuguese.
Right.
While both of them are fighting each other, neither one of them can expand the slave trade.
I'm telling you, that's strategy though. And I mean, she had been negotiating, like, actually meeting with them, like properly negotiating. They call for a meeting, she calls for a meeting, whatever. And I think one of the first things that I learned about Queen Nzinga, what I really admired about her, is the meeting that they called with the Portuguese. They called for her to come and meet. And of course, the Europeans, they'd expect you to be wearing their European clothes and all this stuff, come present yourself like that. She came in her national attire, like just proud of who she was and where she came from, who she was representing. And she went there. They had a mat for her, like expecting her to kneel down to talk to them, right? She made one of her servants kneel down so she can sit, and she used her servant as her throne. Like, you would not come here and like, I'm not being disrespected here, you know.
Mhm.
And she, like, that just really showed me like what kind of person she was. I love that about her. That was the one of the most you know, one of the things that really stood out about her when I learned about Queen Nzinga. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, fighter though.
Charmaine, I
Yeah.
agree.
Mhm.
If only we had learned about these types of people in school. But
Right.
our school, so I'm glad you brought that up. School is
Mhm.
not education.
Yeah.
School is school. Schooling is very different from education. Schooling is like this structure, and you
Programming.
go in and you kind of regurgitate what's given to you. Education is actually learning something in order to be able to apply it. You can be very good at school and be uneducated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can be
Very
able
true.
to repeat everything that somebody tells you and just regurgitate and spit back quotes that people tell you,
Yeah.
right? But you don't know how to apply that to anything.
Yeah.
Like, 2+2=4, but you don't know how to use that to make something.
Yeah.
And so it's education is about, and I said that to say US schooling has no desire to educate anybody,
Right.
not even white people. It wasn't
Yeah.
designed for them. Like, Horace Mann, the father of US education, said that the reason that they wanted the education system was to create good citizens out of young white men. First of all, it was limited to young white men, so it was never built for us. And it wasn't
Right.
to educate the young white men, it was to make them good citizens. And what's the
Right.
definition of a good citizen from somebody with authority and power? To obey, to do what I tell you to do. These are the laws I created, and I will
Mm-hmm.
tell you how to be.
Right. To stay
Because
in line.
exactly, that's why the Electoral College exists.
Right.
George Washington and his people, they did not believe in the intelligence of the American people. And the American people at that time only consisted of white landowners, white male landowners. They knew that those people were illiterate, and most of them came over here from escaping prison, from being in debt in Europe, in England. A lot of the founding members of those voyages who came to the US were in jail in Britain. And the king was like, bro, these prisons, they overcrowded. We can't even feed these people. Like,
Right.
you know what? Tell them that they can go over there to that colony. If they live, they're free. If
Right.
they don't, we don't care. Like,
Right.
they didn't care 2 cents about these people. So the white people that came over here, they didn't have that much intelligence. So they were like, look, we need them intelligent enough to be able to at least read
Right.
and do basic math. That's
Mm-hmm.
what we need them to do. That way we can at least have some type of economy. We can teach them, those people, how to farm and work in factories or something, and they can be, productive. They can be
Even
our
when
workforce.
Yeah, even when you look at like just the structure, still it still reflects that, like in the structure today, you know, in schools, how it's really, you know, they're reinforcing this idea. Like, even when we've been talking about history and the stories that history tells, it's like, of course it's the information that they want to know, you know, like, is the lion telling the story, is the man telling the story,
Right.
who, you know. So they're going to keep reinforcing this idea that they, you know, want to push to us, and also keeping, like, understanding how the country works, how, you know, how it keeps moving, how they need, especially when we talking about in a capital, you know, within capitalism, and you need workers. You need people who will just fall in line and, you know, continue to feed into the system, into the structure that's already there. You don't, because what are we learning the skills? Like, how many times as an adult do you think about, you know, like, well, am I using all of these other little skills that they taught us in school? You know, all these little random ideas and things that they taught us. But we do. Why didn't we get more information on starting a business, on, you know, taxes, and, you know, and all of these different things, all of these useful skills, vocational training? Actually, you know, that's a whole separate school you got to go to learn, you know,
All of
to
your
learn a
points,
trade to start a business. But that's not the
all of
stuff
your
that we're
points are so
learning.
valid. And like, exactly, why didn't we learn that? Why did we take economics for one semester in high
Right,
school?
right. Like we
Think
ain't
about that.
using that.
Economics was a half credit.
Right.
Economics, that is literally the most important math tool that everybody should learn. But we
Yeah.
taking pre-cal and calculus and
Right.
all. Bro, I've never once in
Right.
my life used calculus in
I'm
my
so
daily life.
mad. I'm so mad I took AP calculus. Like, what did that do for my life right now? I needed an extra
So
semester or something else.
we took a half credit of civics and economics.
Mhm.
Now think about
Right.
that. Civics is how this country works. This
Yes.
country right here, like the real life application of how to use your citizenship and your
Right.
constituency.
But
We
why is
took a
that?
half credit, one semester of economics, the real world use of math and how to
Right.
utilize your money. It's
Exactly.
because, back to the original point, they have no intention of educating us to apply knowledge. They want us to fall in line. They don't even want us to know how our constituency works. They don't want us to know how the economy and our money works. They want
Right.
us to be happy when they give us a stimulus, not
Mhm.
understanding that that money is ours to
It's
begin with.
already our exactly. Exactly.
So we are happy and we congratulate them as if they did something
Yeah.
special for us
And
when
then
all they did. Just like
understanding
your tax
also,
refund, that's your
yeah,
money. You
exactly.
overpaid throughout the year. They just paid
Right.
you back.
Right. It's your money. And even understanding the idea that we have a right in it, like to demand things, to request certain things. Like we don't even know. We tend to feel, again, like you just said, like it's a handout, something that they're giving us, you know, like, oh, you should just be grateful for us. We're just here, you know, and not understanding that they are public servants. You are relying on our votes, on our, you know, support to represent us. You are there to represent us, but instead we look at it as if, you know, we're they're granting, you know, these different things to us. Like we are the people that should be grateful and, you know, to be handed some crumbs. We I'm telling you, we need
So
some
when you
adult
think
school
deeply
going
about it,
on.
this is them, and this not just this right there, what we're talking about right now, general education is not
Yeah,
just limited to them miseducating black people. They're
right.
miseducating everybody. Like I
Everybody.
said,
Yes,
the whole point was it wasn't even built for us. This
right.
system was built to miseducate white men. So
Yes.
think about that
Think
from the
about
beginning.
that.
It wasn't
Think about
even
that.
built to educate white men. It was only built
Right.
for white boys so that they
Hmm.
would just be no thinking robots that kind of was
Hmm.
like, oh man, this is a good government. I appreciate
Patriotic.
being here.
It's patriotic.
America is the best.
Hmm.
America, pledge of allegiance. I
Right.
I give my whatever to the flag. Like this is what the American
Because
education
think
system
about its
is.
structure. Think of it's structure. It's repetition. You know what I mean? It's this like limited amount of information, just enough for you to survive, just enough for you to know. You know what I mean? Know to follow. No, not know what to follow, but just know to follow. Right? Because
Exactly.
you have different types of. There are different types of schools and different types of you know, programs that children are learning. I was actually just watching a documentary yesterday. It was a special news special on parents who are unschooling, so not just homeschooling or, you know, things like that, but
Mm.
unschooling. And there are also schools that have more, I forget what it's called, but like where they kind of just let their children like learn, and the children are also like, leading the way in what they want to learn and at the pace that they're learning, things like that,
What
right?
they want to
And
learn, how they want to
yeah,
learn.
and these children are very intelligent. They're very, just aware, socially aware. And how we talked about last week about like being whole people is we shouldn't just break up, all of these different things as if they exist on their own. Like everything just works together. Like education, way, way, way back in the day, like we talk about ancient Kemet and back in that time, the subjects ran together because you can see the different components in all of these lessons. It's not just one idea, just one subject that you're focused on.
Yeah, and it's amazing. So, like, to go back to Charmaine's point, if only we had learned this in school. I brought all that to show you that they have no intention of educating white people. How much less intention do they have about educating us?
They didn't even intend.
We ain't about to learn about no Queen and Finger in their high schools.
Right.
They not about to just that. The last thing they want us to know is this. They don't even want white people to know this, because then white people can't. So racism isn't something that you just born with. You have to be taught that. You have to be taught. So just like black people have been conditioned to believe that we are inferior, white people have been conditioned psychologically to believe that they are superior. So they are victims of the people who have the agenda, because all white people aren't the game masters. Some of them getting played just like the rest of us.
Exactly.
Most of them getting played just like the rest of us. They just end up benefiting from the rules of the game more. That's where white privilege comes in, where the rules of the game just inherently benefit them, even though they're getting played just like we're getting played.
But that's part of the strategy, though. That's part of the strategy of keeping this order, is to give some a little privilege. So now at the very top, they don't have to have their hands on us, right? Like, it's so many layers to it. But yeah,
So when we talk about, Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro, one of the most important books that Black people could possibly read, because it shows you that our dependency on acceptability politics, thinking that by excelling in their educational structure will give us some type of acceptance into their society, first of all, is untrue. Second, being intelligent based on their standards doesn't really quantify intelligence. And it's so dangerous that once you have been accepted by their rate of intelligence, it's very difficult to give you actual education, because once you have been taught something, it's very difficult, without years of cognitive dissonance, trying to break down the walls that you've built up because you've been rewarded over and over again by regurgitating this falseness, these false narratives that they taught you. So this is your reward system. So I'm telling you that what you learned was wrong. You're going to fight me.
Yes.
Even if I'm telling you that you've been taught to hate yourself, I'm teaching you to love yourself. You're going to fight against that too.
And you're going to look at me like I'm crazy. Everybody who's outside of that, who've gained, knowledge outside of that box, outside of those restrictions, you're going to be looked at as the crazy person. You extra radical. You extra radical because it's like, who taught you that? Where did you learn that from? Like, that's not what that's not what my manual says.
So my major in college was psychology at a point, and I wanted to get a PhD in psychology. Still might, who knows? But one of the things I learned when I was looking at PhDs in psychology is a PhD program they would prefer you to come directly out of your bachelor's degree directly into their PhD program. Now, a lot of other degrees want you to have a master's degree, or having a master's degree is a benefit to you already having a master's and then going into a PhD.
Right.
Psychology, they look at it differently, and this is why. They say, because there's so many different schools of psychology, that if you have a master's degree going into a PhD program, you believe that you already know something. So you already have a structure that's built up in the way that you know about psychology. What PhD programs in psychology want to do is they want to build that up from scratch. They don't want to have to tear down what you think you already know to have to build up
Man,
something else. So they want you
man,
fresh out of bachelor and build
yeah,
it up from the start, because they know it's going to take a minute for you to undo, because you're going to spend all your coursework time fighting against the teacher because
right.
you was taught it was done this way, and they're telling you to do it this way. They're like, no, shut up. We do it this way over here. So
Yeah.
by saying that, it is beneficial for us to start as young as possible, when we can get our people from scratch before they need to unlearn the falseness that they've
Hello.
already been taught. Because then when
Hello.
you learn the untruth, you're going to fight me when I present you with the truth.
I'm telling you, that's
I've
why
had so
I
many
prefer.
arguments with so many older Black people.
Yes,
Like,
it's hard.
I had,
It's hard.
oh my,
It's like the longer. Have you ever had like let a fruit like an orange or something just sit for a long time? You know how the rind just like toughens. It's like it just gets
yeah,
harder and harder
exactly.
because
You can't even
and
feel
that's
it.
why I prefer, right. That's why I prefer, like, going after the babies. We have to start with our children, like learning. Imagine how much easier it would be if you grow up knowing, having certain information, just knowing certain things, just raised with a certain confidence, rather than you're learning one way, you already beat up with all of these ideas of who you are and who you're not, and what you're not supposed to be, and what you're not supposed to look like, and what you're supposed to look like. All of this stuff, right? Already being beaten up, beaten into you until you're an adult, or at least a young adult, right? And then someone comes into your life and starts to try to reverse that. Like you said, you'll be fighting against it. It's hard to believe because you haven't had it even like reinforced throughout your
And
life.
then
And it takes time. It takes time
think
to
about it like
adjust
this:
to certain ideas.
your parents didn't tell you that it was wrong. Your teachers
Mm.
didn't tell you that it was wrong. They reinforced this false information. So here's the thing that you have to deal with. Either your parents didn't know, either your
Yeah.
teachers didn't know. So that
Mhm.
is something that's taken away from your parents, because you look at them as, that's who I looked up to. So you're
Right.
telling me the people that I looked up to and I honored, they
Mhm.
had false information. They didn't know.
Right.
They weren't as
Right.
intelligent as I thought they were. So now
Mhm.
now I take it personally, because you're tearing down people that I cherish.
Yeah.
Either they didn't know, or you're telling me that they intentionally
They
lied to me.
intentionally, yes,
Either way,
exactly.
you're
Mhm.
tearing down people that I cherish, that I
Right.
appreciate, that I've honored. It's
Mhm.
going to be difficult. I'm going to take that personally, which is
Yeah.
why it's so hard, because you're telling me that, hold on, my parents weren't the smartest people in the world. My teachers weren't the smartest people in the world. My mentors weren't the smartest in the world. Nobody at any point in my life challenged this information that's wrong.
Right. Right.
And that's very difficult to get over.
But
That's
what
why,
happens though? What happens though when we get, because now we always talk about how, like, we can access all of this information. It's in the palm of our hands. We can go to the
mhm,
library, like whatever method you go to, to learn certain things. The information is out there, right? But I think we can get comfortable. There are several reasons, right? A lot of people, either it's hard to just understand, or hard to conceive, just because of what you've been taught previously and conditioned to. But then I think it's also a resistance that can come from um, just not knowing how to handle it. You know how sometimes, like, because it can be
oh
scary,
yeah,
because if you're walking out on a ledge but you don't know, you can't see that far ahead, like, people are just hesitant. And I think we stay in a position to where we rather just have this limited knowledge, because once you know certain things, I know, like we talk about watching movies and stuff. Now we can't watch movies with our same naive, like just non-thinking, young minds.
Right.
Now we have to analyze all of these different parts. What is it trying to reinforce? What is this message that's coming through? What are these different images that I'm seeing? We have to, once you know more, you have a responsibility to act differently, to go about, life differently. Even now, learning certain things about our history, about ourselves, our people, anything, we have to know how to like move better. Even learning about the system, how the system wasn't created or is created to do this one job, and it might be harmful. Now your whole idea of like, oh no, this is my country, why would they ever do this? Why would the government ever do this to people? It's like, it's hard for people to adjust to that idea, like, but it still is your responsibility to move forward with the knowledge that you now know. You should be able to change your mind. You don't have to stay in what you learned, before. As a child, you learned certain things, you had a certain understanding, but as you grow older and grow wiser, you should be able to expand your thinking and like break it down. And so you
Here's
have
the
more like
thing.
a bigger knowledge base.
You talked about being afraid, right? Going out on a ledge because you feel like you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
And I say, but the answer to that is Sankofa. And what I mean by that is ASAP, what we're talking about. We're talking about we are building upon paths that have already been blazed, trails that have already been blazed. The thing is, we feel like we're walking out on a ledge because we think we're the first to discover it.
Right.
But when you understand that Queen Nzinga was doing things in the 1600s, when you realize Ella Baker was doing things in the early 20th century, when you realize Martin Delaney was doing things in the early 19th century, when you realize that Cuffey was doing things in the 18th century, when you know that you're not the first generation and you know, okay, this person did this and that lasted for that long and they made that impact and they were able to do this. I stand on what they've already done. When we don't know what our people have done, which is why history is so important, which is why knowing what has already occurred so that we don't repeat it is so important. So not only so we don't repeat it, so we can redo some things. So we can repeat things, some things that worked in the past. So we can lean on some of those things and be like, I'm not the first person with this idea. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. And please don't be discouraged that just because we are still fighting this struggle. We started out this episode talking about how this has been an ongoing struggle. So many centuries. We're not even talking about since, the 1900s, centuries.
Right.
Before our ancestors arrived on these shores, right? This has been an ongoing struggle. So don't be discouraged, and feeling like, well, that stuff must not have worked because we're still fighting. We're still holding the same picket signs. I was recently just talking to someone who grew up in the 60s and was, talking about how just even that struggle, they had to call people up using the phone. When we learned about what they were doing back in the civil rights era, and they had to write, like some people had to handwrite notes and things like that and pass them on before they had the print press, like way back in the day. And then you go to further down the line, even when they had newspapers and stuff, you still had to wait. Now we can make one social media post, you can send an email to thousands of people, you can reach millions of people now across the ocean, right? We are on 2 different continents right now, and we're talking in real time. Imagine if we took the resources that we have now with the knowledge that we have, even seeing the strategies, things that were used back in the day, we can learn how to improve on those things, but we don't have to start from square one. That's the beauty in it, and like the advancement of technology and just where we are today. We have access to more things and more opportunities and positions that we can hold. We have way more influence, than we could have, and reach that we had before. And so we need to take
Mm-hmm.
advantage of that, but don't be discouraged thinking that, well, just because we're fighting the same fight, that it didn't work or that we're just doomed. Like, no, we just have to keep moving forward and learn and move with the resources that we have now. We have such a big advantage now.
Yeah. And like I said in a previous episode, it's not like we are under immediate threat just for having a show like this.
Right.
Which is in itself an advancement.
Yeah. Because our houses would have been bombed. TJ, our houses would have been
a
bombed.
Pirate radio. We would have had to we would have had to steal a radio signal just to be able to get on air saying stuff like this back in the day. Like we talking not, and when I say back in the day, I'm talking like maybe like 60 years ago, which is still within the time frame of the lifetime of somebody who's still living right now.
Exactly.
Like, so we have made advancements, and it's very important because sometimes, and even I've been guilty of saying that it feels like we are starting at the same position our grandparents started from. We're starting right at the starting line. There have been movement in this relay. There has been movement in the relay.
Definitely.
The baton has been passed and we've moved the goalpost forward. But it's not 100-yard dash.
Right.
We're not running 100-yard dash
and then we stop.
relay race. They don't even make those because it's not even long enough to do a relay. You got to run all the way around the track to complete a relay. We just a quarter of the way maybe. And like, hey, right now, like we are saying, the reason that we are doing the playbook now, this is the perfect time for us to pull together all of the resources, all of the information, all of the different activities, all of the different strategies of the people who came before us, and we can compile them in one place. And not only can we do our job by not pitting them against one another, but by saying, okay, this strategy, these plays can work against that defensive set.
Man,
that defensive set we can throw a play action pass, we can throw a bomb, we can do a run and play, we can do a quarterback sneak. We have different plays from different legends, from different types of people who have laid down different strategies and different access points to get to the same goal. We're trying to score, right? And then on defense, we're trying to to prevent the other team from scoring against us. And against that type of offensive play, when they attack us, we can defend by doing this, or this, the strategy of this person, the strategy of that person. And so it'll be laid out like that. But this is the perfect time when we talk about, oh man, this generation, we have access to all this education and information. But the thing is, if we don't know who to look for, we don't know where to look. You can have Google all day. If you don't have the name to type in, if you've never heard of Queen Nzinga, you're not going to type that into Google.
Yeah, like, because, who is she? Like, you didn't know what to look for.
So, the information is there, but if you don't know what to look for, it's useless, which is why we create this platform, which is why on this platform, I'm not using my professional voice. I'm talking to you like I usually just speak, right? To give myself humanity, so that when people watch this, they're like, okay, I can do that as well. It's not so far out of my league that I can't access that information. Yeah. We try to, we laugh in this show, we get serious, we get emotional, we talk about different things, sports, celebrity, whatever, so that it's palatable for anybody to grab on. I want to be able
relation. Yeah.
Exactly.
We're not all like disconnected.
Right. And I want people to be able to watch this show as adults, as adolescents, as children, as, all ages so that you can get information and you're like, oh man, that was a cool way to get that. And now I have work to do because we leave you with work to do. That's homework after ASAP goes off.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
we put descriptions, you got to click those links and you got to do your Googles because we're going to pop, you know, names on the screen. You know what I mean? And it's up to you how far you take the information. We can only plant that seed. What you do with it is on you. So we appreciate you guys, you know, watching, and we love doing this show because it's so fun. And
it's keeping me sharp.
I got my education. Right, exactly. It's got me back into my rhythm of reading and got me back to writing. And you know, I'm just, my brain is flowing on those on those in those areas again. So I'm like, I'm feeling fresh. But yeah, man, it's very important for us to know where we are, how these things work, and what we can do. What we can do. Not just theorize, not just think, not just complain, not just talk about what we can do. There are actually things that we can do and put in place. Like, people have fought on our behalf. And again, just to reiterate why we did this episode, we're talking about 17th century, 1600s. We're talking about people on the continent of Africa fighting against slave trade so as to prevent this narrative that we all continental Africans don't like the people in the diaspora because they sold us anyway. We're the same people.
Right.
It affected them just as much as it affected us.
Right. And like, even looking at like whatever
their mothers and fathers were kidnapped.
Yeah. It's just like whatever flags that we're carrying, you know, we can show pride in our own in our individual experiences, like wherever we are throughout the diaspora, wherever we are in the world. But we have to realize also, like we talked about earlier in this episode, about just different world events, even involving the same people. We talked about last week, like the ships that were carrying Africans to be enslaved were, they would stop off in different places. So your relatives could literally be, you know, or other people from your, you know, village or wherever could be on another, just on another coast, just somewhere else in the world. You even travel the same route, right? Like, we are not disconnected in, besides, you know, languages that we speak, foods that we eat, the flags that we carry, like whatever our culture, you know, consists of, we are still the same people. We're the same fruit.
Here's another thing. I heard this from an African scholar, and I will grab the name later and I'll probably put it in the description. But he said, think about it like this. Everybody that they took from the continent wasn't like in the second generation. There were people who already had children who were captured, which means some of my ancestors, the continent of Africa, has ancestors that are in the diaspora. So it's not just us looking to Africa, the continent, for our ancestors. Some of them have ancestors who were captured and brought over here.
Yeah, exactly.
Because as children, their parents got stolen. Their uncle got stolen. So their grandfather got stolen because they stole people who were able-bodied. It didn't say that these people didn't already have families.
Right.
So you have to think about every aspect of it. Like, yeah, it's some people who are living in Africa today who's, you know, they were the children of somebody who was enslaved. So now their grandchildren are the descendants of someone who was enslaved. So again, when we say something like ADOS, and only people who are the descendants of the enslaved who were in a certain country, it's impossible to trace.
Right.
It's dumb. And you're just causing division for no reason. Like,
and
it doesn't make sense on any level.
It's so much trauma though, that like I think we start to create these, like this division ourselves. You know, like we were already trying to be divided by other people. But I think we like, just due to all of this trauma and not really knowing how to identify that we create these alternate realities for ourselves, right? Just trying to piece together some type of story, or like it's just something to cope, I feel, identifying with all of these different things, but not wanting to identify, like, however, a lot of people don't feel that we are, truly African. A lot of people don't think that that the transatlantic slave trade actually took place, or that so it's just like I think, I'm telling you, I hear it all. Honestly, I hear it all.
I know.
Yeah,
I know those
and
people.
it's just crazy, right? We know. But I mean, that's the thing, though, is that we have to really take the initiative to educate ourselves. We talked about the school systems not actually being there to educate us. First of all, they didn't plan for us to be in their schools. First of all,
we ain't supposed to be in it.
We're not even supposed to be educated in their schools, right? So of course our stories, and think about, why would they want us to be empowered? If we hear about Queen Nzinga, we hear about all of these people that we spoke, that we highlighted on the show so far, why would they want to put information in the books, in the schools, to reinforce this idea that we have been resisting, that we can fight, that we know how to strategize? Why would they want to put that information in there? So it's our responsibility, first of all, to learn it, to seek this information. So for people like us, who have studied these things, it's our responsibility to pass this information on to people who won't go to college or have not been to college and study this specific topic, or you know what I mean, to have this exposure to all this information. Because I know, like, most of my friends who went to college, they didn't study African American studies like I did. They don't have the same information or know the same people who I know, who I've heard about and done further research on. And even thinking about me as a world traveler, there's information that I know, things that I've seen firsthand, that I'm not going to rely on the news or the third, fourth hand source, to find these things out. So it's our responsibility to bring this knowledge. Those of us who do know, we can't be hoarding all of this knowledge, just for ourselves. So we are in this social activism playbook. That's what we're doing, is we're just basically, we're like treasure hunters, right? We're just digging up all of this. The stuff is already there. These treasures are already there. All we're doing is just kind of repackaging it, to bring it back to you, to just kind of put it in your face, show you that you don't have to start from square one. We don't have to start from scratch. The stuff is already there. The plays are there. What it say? But if we use that logic, some could say there's only one race, the human race, and say we're all distant relatives or family.
Yeah, that's the truth. That is biologically true.
Right.
But understanding that, so here's the thing about truth and fact, right? The fact of the matter is that there is only one human race, because a race, if you break it down scientifically, means species.
Right.
It doesn't take away from the fact that racism and that the divisions of the socially constructed race is still true to life in its impact.
Yeah.
So you can't lean on the one human race thing when you're facing racism. So you have to acknowledge the different ethnicities. I don't even like using the term race to identify people, because it is made up. It's not factual, but it's real. Right. And it's like, how is that? How does that make sense? It's like a paradox. It has a real world impact. It has real world effects of my difference, or the perceived difference of me from other people, and our humanity in the way that society works, even the global society, because white supremacy permeates everywhere. Asia,
it's not just us.
Africa, South America, Antarctica, wherever you want to go. You know what I mean? So those things exist. When we talk about that one thing, though, we still have pride in our ethnicity and where we come from, right? So we still can draw from that and draw encouragement from that, from our recent cultural basis.
Right.
So like you can see different cultures, like people in Scandinavia, they do things differently from people in Ireland, and people in Angola do things differently from people in Kuwait. So we still have our ethnic background that we can pull from Africa and draw from. So when we talk about being African and we talk about having pride in that, that is not us being divisive. That is us drawing on power of our culture, something that we lean on. And even when you bring groups together, even when we have multi-ethnic unity, the unity isn't in talking back your differences. It's about presenting them and saying, okay, this is how we do things. Let me learn from you on how you do things. And then you learn from me on how we do things. So it's not about walking back our differences. It's about putting them out front. Real unity is being able to accept everyone for their differences and acknowledging them and celebrating them.
Mm-hmm.
That's
the
what
thing.
we're talking about.
Right, but everyone didn't go through what we went through. You can at a certain point, like I think because humans have been humans like to classify and put things on a scale to compare and contrast and all this stuff. I was just watching actually a thing on, it was an octopus, something about an octopus and different sea life and stuff, and I was thinking, like, our idea of intelligence, we have no idea. To say that we're the most intelligent beings, like they can literally shift, like just change form. They can change, you know what I mean? Like this intelligence on a whole nother level that we can't even, we can't even do. So I think when we think about how humans like to classify and say, who's intelligent, and just kind of show our worth and try to prove our worth or unworthiness. Also, we get confused with, I think there's been like classifying like Africans as less intelligent. By other people, Europeans who have been doing this, right? They want to classify us as unintelligent and all of these different things, and they come up with systems to be able to keep us oppressed, to keep us in a certain situation. And so we just have to find the truth. Basically, we have to uncover the truth and find out who we really are. And I think also acknowledging everyone didn't go through the same experiences as we did. We can't sit here and be like, well, the human race experienced the Holocaust. The human race didn't just experience the Holocaust. People within the human race experienced the Holocaust. Some people, were the murderers, and some people were murdered. We have the right to identify, amongst ourselves, like who went through what, and to seek justice, because we're not all equal on, like, as far as our experiences. And so we can't just bring that whole human aspect into it. It didn't happen to every human.
Exactly. And we got a comment that said, so Black people in Africa are technically no longer relatives because the politics contradict that. Nope. I can't agree with that, because just like we were conditioned during enslavement, people were conditioned during colonization. So the conditioning that when I'm talking to African Americans that argued with me about whether I should call my organization African Unity Initiative and not Global Unity, the same way that I had to argue with African Americans about whether racism still existed or whether it was a good thing that we got enslaved because we were able to come to America. Like I had Black people, multiple Black people have said that type of sentiment to me. So that same type of idea, if African Americans have that, if you come across some Africans who have similar ideas, who've bought into a white supremacy, then we have to re-educate people. We can't just throw people away because they don't know yet. Now, I'm not saying we spend all of our waking moments trying to, you have to plant a seed and move on. So you give them access to the information. If they take it at that moment, wonderful. If they take it and then it takes somebody else to water that seed, so be it. I'm not the type of person who you have to give me the credit for giving you the information. I don't care how you got it. So long as you get it and you become an ally and you become a bearer of the beautiful burden, then we all good. I don't care if you were a diehard fan and you were there in the losing seasons, or you were a bandwagon fan and you bought your jersey when we won the Super Bowl.
Right.
I don't care.
Exactly. We on the team, right? We rooting for the same team, right? We got the same goal.
All in it together, and it's like we have to be patient with one another. And this is my message to my woke brothers and sisters. You weren't always there. And if you were always there, think about what family you lived in. Maybe your parents knew and they brought you up in a certain way and they gave you access to books or knowledge.
Right.
Great. Now use that to go educate some people who grew up in the housing projects, who, when I grew up in the projects, my library, the Carver Home Library, did not have books from Asa Hilliard in it. It did not have books from John Henrik Clark in my library. And I was a so-called scholar in elementary and middle school and high school. So when I went to the library to go read, what did I have? Surface level information. I was fortunate enough to have an older brother, to have an uncle, to have a friend of the family who saw my desire to learn more and gave me books. And fortunate enough that some of those books had bibliographies that put me onto other books. So education on top of education. So we can't say that because the politics in Africa reflect something different. The politics in Africa have been polluted by European powers that still dictate what happens to the money.
Exactly.
What still happens in the political offices. I've lived in Africa for years, so I can say on a day-to-day basis, when I talk to African people who aren't the authority figures of who are the puppets, when you talk to the real people, they have every bit of desire to know more about what's going on with us. They don't know because they don't get access to it just because their education reflects the colonized system.
Exactly.
If you're an Anglophone African country, you get your education from the British system. If you're a Francophone country, you get your education from the France system. So you learn the history that they want you to learn. And then some nations are more, and this is the sacrifice that they make. Like Sekou Touré said, I didn't want to take France's money, so I'm not going to. They took all of the resources that were in Guinea and pulled it out, all the railroads, all the transportation, all of the infrastructure. So now they have to start from scratch. And it's not even from scratch because they had already built up their country. Europeans come, build up their thing, then they tear down what we had already built. So we're not even starting from scratch. We're starting from below scratch.
Because you got to tear down and then build back up, right? Like that's the thing. We have to start. We're not even at ground level when we have to tear down, unlearn. We were just talking about education and about unlearning certain things before we can build on top. We have to get on ground level at least to start building. If you're in the negative, if you're in the red, you can't build on that, right? We have to get on ground level. So we have to tear down some of those things that we were already conditioned to, some of the things that we already learned. But it's just amazing. You were talking about, because both you and I have lived in different African countries, and just it's also very interesting to learn that a lot of people, even there on the continent, African people on their land, right, they were still colonized. You were just talking about how, like, they're still learning like French and English history and things like that, and those systems. It's amazing when I learned, it was amazing to learn that a lot of them didn't know their own like history, like a lot of things, a lot of people and events in their own history on their land. And that's just to think about that, like colonization, like this is not only our issues that we're having in the diaspora is not only unique to us. This whole system has been harmful to all of us, like you said, globally, right? It's not only Africans who have suffered under this, and so we have to just think like really globally to be able to fix this too. We can identify as one people, or like just look beyond ourselves. We have to look outside of ourselves, and it's not just, these situations are not just unique to us. And I think when we separate ourselves, separate our struggles, then it makes it easier for those who want to oppress us, because what do? They come in and they divide and conquer. They wouldn't be able to divide us, if we thought more as a group. And that's how we have to
Isolation
move.
makes us vulnerable.
Yeah, we have to move like that as a group. We can't just think
And
so individualistic.
And we say this every time on this show, right? African Unity Initiative is about tangible Pan-Africanism. ASAP, it's about immediacy. It stands for the Afrikan Social Activism Playbook, meaning plays, things that you can actually do, activities we can participate in, what we can implement, what we can draw from that has already been done. There are elements of the African independence movement that you can specifically hear from the people who started it, like a Kwame Nkrumah, like a Jomo Kenyatta, like a Sekou Touré, who say that they drew from the strength of the diaspora to go back home to fight for independence. They pulled from the struggles of the Caribbean, the Afro-Caribbeans, and the struggles of the Africans born in the United States. The struggle that we fought put a struggle in them to identify with what we were doing, so that they went home and did the same. Apartheid was put on notice because South Africans came to the United States, bonded with African Americans. African Americans didn't say, "Oh, that's a South Africa issue." No, it's a Black issue.
Right.
So we are fighting for them just as much as we are fighting for our freedom struggle. So we don't say civil rights. We don't say Black power. We don't say apartheid. We say Black freedom struggle, because it doesn't have a timeline. It doesn't have a geography. It doesn't have any type of ethnic basis. It's about us as a collective African people. And there are activities that have been done in the past that can be recreated right now, that were successful then, that can be successful now. And it's about not talking about it. Pan-Africanism, not theoretical, but tangible. But what you can do. Like right now, we have programs that are going on in Peru with Afro-Peruvians, in Uganda, in Sierra Leone, in Atlanta, where we're introducing these communities to one another. They're going to know each other. They're going to know what's going on with each other. They're going to know how to communicate with one another. They're going to know education about one another. They're going to be able to socialize. They're going to understand the culture. They're going to be able to share experiences, but also take on each other's beautiful burden. And carry it together where it's not as heavy when we all carry our load.
And
you carry what you carry.
Right. And I also love like what we do on the African Diaspora Dialogue, when we have representatives from all of these different experiences, all of these different regions, right? Black people sharing our experiences, all, and showing how similar we are. A lot of times we think because someone speaks a different language or they're in a different geographic location that we are so different. And we talk constantly about how our histories are connected. We came from one place to go to another, like, you know what I mean? Like, we are very, very connected, and we need to see that. We need to see that we're not so, that all of our experiences, just because it's a little, we have unique experiences, like, due to where we are and how we understand things. It's all from the same, they come from the same place a lot of times. It's the same people. The English didn't only colonize, in one country or in one part of Africa. They didn't only bring enslaved people to one other colony, you know, and across the globe. We are connected more than we know. So what is this? Right now, it's my mission to create a library in the Gambia to re-educate our brothers and sisters on the continent to contribute to the Black freedom liberation movement. Beautiful. That's what we need.
And shout out to that. And put a link of, if you have a website or
Right.
anything, put a link in the description so we can, you know, put it on the screen so we can figure out how to support you.
Exactly.
Like, this is about collaboration.
Yes.
Like, it's enough. And one of the things that we talk about here on ASAP specifically is the fact that, you know, there's so many missed opportunities in our history where you could have had people like W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington work together instead of seeing themselves as opponents.
Right.
So anything that we do right now in this generation has to be collaborative.
Yes.
We have to cooperate with one another. We have to collaborate. We have to team up. Like we say, isolation is vulnerability.
Yeah.
So when we see people doing different things that are, you know, in line with what we're doing, we're all on board for it. I don't see it as a competitor. That is insane. That's an insane way to view it, because I'm not your competitive. I'm your brother.
Right. And we
I
are
am
fighting
your
the
supporter.
same struggle. Yeah.
If you
That's
build a
the thing. We
library,
can create Go ahead.
that means we can support that library. That means that our information can be disseminated through that library.
Right.
That means that we can
send
right. It's so, if one person wins, everybody will win. We need that type of mentality. That's where we come from. So we are, and we had another question, but finish your point. Finish your point before we go to the next.
Well, I wanted to mention first, like you talked about a lot of these events being directly connected to or linked to other events in history throughout the world. Kwame Nkrumah was being educated and inspired by also what was going on throughout the civil rights era. It was the first African nation to gain independence from their European colonizers, right? And they started the movement for all of these different African countries getting independence. And then not only there, you got to look throughout like the rest of the world too. It wasn't only on a continent of Africa, but look at what sparked it. These are direct results of these events, and that shows you how connected we are and how we can inspire each other. And again, linking it back to just the technology and different advancements that we have today, we have to take advantage of these things. We can't look at it, you know, like only for the distractions that it can create. But how can we connect to each other? We just talked about, like, we just got this comment talking about a library being built in the Gambia. We can all contribute to that. We can donate books. We can, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's so many different things that we can do to accomplish these goals and much faster. We can do that together, though. We don't do that separately. We can do that together. And you have to think about what is our goal, though, you know. And you also spoke about having all of these different players, you know, these important players. We can create a super team now. What do they do in the Olympics? You bring in the best of the best, you know, from all of these different teams. They represent from their own areas, from their regions. We can create our super teams to compete. Imagine that. Imagine, instead of separating, saying, well, they're just, you know, they're just great on this. They have this skill, right? And this other player has another skill. No, Marcus Garvey's playing, right? Along with someone else, along with whoever else, like whoever, Booker T. Washington and right. Like,
and
I mean, we can have just so many, and Du Bois, we can have so many different perspectives, see the qualities that all of them, Martin and Malcolm. We didn't need either or. We like to separate. Like, again, we like to classify and try to rank and put things on a scale. We can see how useful all of these different skills are together, all of these different qualities are, and how we can use them together, because all of their strategies work. Whether they were just inspirational, whether they actually have strategy that they used and you know, guide us somewhere. It's so many different things that we can put together now and use them.
Well, so I see a question. It says, how do we undo, and I'll just put it up, right? historical put all our business out on the street syndrome. Well, we didn't always have that. Honestly, right now it's like social media. We were very covert and very strategic in the before time. But we have to get back to that strategy. We have to understand. That's why in ASAP, in the Afrikan Social Activism Playbook that we're writing, everything isn't going to be just out front. You're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have to show that you're committed at some level to be able to gain access to the information that we're given, because, we need serious people. And we understand that, the first Black people that were hired for the FBI were hired to investigate and infiltrate the UNIA and take down Marcus Garvey. So we understand that that is possible, right? And these are things that we have to be conscious of and be aware of. Even me saying this on this public platform raises, antennas. But we know that history now. We have access to it and we can plan for it, right? And we can make sure that we maneuver and do our best to learn from the successes of our ancestors as well as their mistakes. And now we have access to all of that, and we can compile it and understand, okay, maybe we were a little bit too naive here. Maybe we were too out in the public here. Maybe we, criticized this person in the public when we could have done it, had a private meeting. These are things that because we are also our weakness. Exactly. Yep. No more, and we can't control every individual. All we can do is present the way that we want to be presented, right? So we can't stop our so-called, new age social activists from having public Twitter spats, which is embarrassing. And I hate when it happens, but it does. But then we just overhear the way that we're doing things. We have to keep moving forward in the way that we're doing it, and believe that by doing what we're doing and becoming successful in what we're doing, that people will model what we're doing and go that way when they find success. And there's so much that we can be distracted by of, what ifs and so many intangibles and so many variables that are in this situation where, sometimes the problem isn't as complicated as you want it to be. So you just have to follow the order of operations. In math, you got to do the exponents, then you got to do the parentheses, then you do multiplication, then you do division, then you do addition, then you do subtraction. Sometimes you're trying to do the formula out of order, and then you get the wrong answer and you get all mixed up. But if you just follow the order operations, just stick to your path, understand that what you're building and what you're doing and how you're presenting to your people is the way that you truly believe in, and you're not doing harm to anybody else by doing what you're doing. So long as you are promoting something for yourself and what you're promoting isn't doing any harm to anybody else, but you're positively increasing yourself, I shouldn't have any problem with what you're doing. Right. So long as what we're doing is positively being productive to our community, and it's not at the same time inhibiting somebody else from living to their fullest of humanity, then we should be able to get, be productive and keep moving in our own path. And we know that there will be obstacles along the way, but that's just life. You know what I mean? And so we just got to keep it pushing. And, so that is where we are. So again, we did this episode to spotlight Queen Nzinga so that we know that there's no point in history where we as Black people just succumbed to the pressures of not only just enslavement, but any type of, we were just jolly and welcoming of this oppression and this exploitation. We fought back, right? And we will continue to fight back for generations upon generations. And, Queen Nzinga had diplomatic intelligence, warrior spirit, skills in battle, on the battlefield with her soldiers, not sitting behind and giving orders from, the Oval Office, killing other people and putting other people's children's lives at risk on the battlefield herself. Right. And so that's a whole nother thing. And just, kind of debunking the idea that there were intelligence in Africa on all the different levels prior to Europeans coming. We are going to continue to put information in the, the description, in the comment section. We appreciate all of the activity that we had today. We are truly growing and it feels good.
Yes.
And just to leave you guys on, we are carriers of a beautiful burden. We are African Unity Initiative, and we believe that with the assistance and the support and availability of every able-minded person, because you don't have to be able-bodied, just got to be able-minded. So long as you can think and contribute your thoughts and some of your actions, we can do this. We can continue this fight, and it doesn't have to be as difficult. We just need a critical mass. We're here to actualize African unity by making Pan-Africanism tangible by doing small community-based development, community-based economic development, community-based economic and community development, social development, wherever we are. So when we're in Sierra Leone, we focus on Sierra Leone. When we're in Atlanta, we focus on Atlanta. Now, after we gain some successes, then we go and we start introducing the communities that we work with in Haiti to Sierra Leone, to Peru, to Uganda, to Atlanta. And that's when we start the Pan-Africanism. That's when we start to communicate and join the unity piece. Right. And then it goes from the micro to the macro. So it's step by step. It's not just Pan-Africanism as this one, large, unreachable concept. It's Pan-Africanism as a actual step-by-step path that makes it very attainable and sustainable.
Right. We can see
because
it.
It's not unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
We can see it and feel it, and that's the beauty of it too. Is knowing the process, and knowing that it's been tried and true. That's the importance of bringing this playbook to you, is to see that these things have been done. Right? We know things that can work. Again, don't be discouraged because we're still fighting. This will be a long struggle. It wasn't overnight that we got into this position.
Right.
It's going to be, to get to a position where you're so damaged and things, it's been conditioning over time. A lot of times, even in personal situations, you can relate it to, just bring it smaller, make it into a smaller situation and see how, if you've been attacked one time, it's a difference if you've been attacked, since you were a child, since you came into existence, and you've been conditioned to where now you don't see anything as being possible. But I think that's what's important about now, and our responsibility. Also, again, think about what your personal responsibility is, what our responsibility as a community, you know what I mean? And in our respective regions, and, in all of our different experiences, think about what our responsibility is to the whole. Because, with more education, you will, if you know about these things, if you know about people like a Queen Nzinga, like Ella Baker, like all of these other people we highlighted, you would know you're not alone. If you're already thinking on that track, oh, this can work, right? You already see someone already did it, right? But then also think about how we have the resource, how you can use your platform and your resources now. They didn't have Instagram back in the day. They had to handwrite memos. Sometimes they had to, to travel from here to there. Think about before they had cars. We have so much of an advantage now, and we need to really just take advantage of that. And we can, we can definitely make a stronger play now, make a stronger move.
Exactly. So Michelee, let the people know where they can find you, how they can support you, this Black-owned business that you have.
Oh, I appreciate that. You can find me at mishmashworld.com, and my Instagram for the business is Mishmash World. I just added a few new items that I've been excited about. So I'm getting prepared for different shows that I'm about to do, and sell some things here while the world is, at least on this side of the world, we're starting to open back up a little bit. But
Right.
yeah, I'm keep praying for y'all over there because I don't know. But you could also find me on social media to get in touch with me at Michelee the Maker on Twitter and IG.
Exactly. And if you guys want any information on how to get involved with African Unity Initiative, you can visit us on our website, www.africanunity.us. And you can find us on all social media platforms at African Unity. And our YouTube page, if you're watching this on YouTube, we have some Facebook people. Please subscribe, like, comment, share the video, and subscribe so we can, get more people into the stream, more people getting this information, this knowledge that we are freely sharing with people, because it's to give away. You gain knowledge to be able to share it, to pass it on, so that more people can help you, carry on and pass it on. That's the whole point. Hoarding knowledge is one of the dumbest things somebody can do.
I'm telling you.
It's like so unproductive. But our YouTube channel is, youtube.com/C/African Unity, and that's African with a K. And we appreciate you all. We're gonna end this episode a little differently. We had a video that we were gonna play about Queen Nzinga, and so we're gonna play it now at the end of the episode, and then we'll go out with our regular
so we're
scheduled programming. So
we're encouraging you to not just take our word for it, but do your own research, right? So we'll leave you with some with resources and things to learn from. But you can be inspired. We're hoping to inspire you to learn on your own, do your own research too.
Right.